Okay, happy Sabbath. Me and Elena are going to sing together. Amen. Let me just connect. His love for me, oh, His love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last He has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, He died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free. Child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
Okay, so the first part of our talk here is about I borrowed from the 17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork by John C. Maxwell, but I want some participation from the audience here. So the first ones that I'll read, I'll give that, and then as I read through some of these, then I can get some audience participation. If you can give me a Bible character or characters that would fit the description of these different laws, and then later this is a general overview of getting to the root of the conflict. So the first one is the law of significance. One is too small to achieve success. So I wrote in here, no man is an island. So we have biblical examples of David plus God defeats Goliath, 1 Samuel 14. Aaron and Hur, help Moses hold up his hands in battle. And Paul and Luke shipwrecked en route to Rome. And we get the Luke part in here because there's some text in Acts that says we. At the beginning, it's kind of as if that person is not there, but then there's some texts that say we in there, and the author of the book of Acts is Luke. So actually during that shipwreck, where Paul was shipwrecked, Luke was actually with him, because he says we in these texts. So you can look that up in the book of Acts. Some negative ones are Samson. He died by himself with the hands of the Philistines. Absalom died by himself with no one to help him when he was hanging in the tree, caught by his hair. A positive one is the paralytic and his 4 friends. We have that in our Sabbath school lesson. So the next one I give, law number 2, the law of the big picture. The goal is more important than the role. Can anybody give me any biblical examples of somebody who may have their the law of the big picture? The goal is more important than the role. Any thoughts? Any quick thoughts here? So I wrote down Daniel when he was talking to Belshazzar. He told him to remember that God did what God did to his grandfather, King Nebuchadnezzar, and he also told him to keep his rewards. He was given the third a ruler in the kingdom, but he says, keep your rewards to yourself, but I will read the handwriting on the wall. So Goliath is mocking God and Israel, and someone needs to, I wrote down, shut him up. These men who stayed, the men who stayed by the stuff when Ziklag was invaded, there were 600 men, but 200 were too tired to keep pursuing, so they stayed by and guarded the stuff. And when they got back, the 400 men did not want them to have any of the spoils that they had returned. But David said that they were to split the stuff evenly amongst them, even the ones that stayed by and guarded the things. A negative one, and these can be negative. Sometimes there's a negative influence of the same type. So a negative big picture is Saul is jealous of David after he kills Goliath, especially when the women were singing, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. Now that was not true, because David killed the Goliath and maybe a few other in the battle, but definitely not true. But that negative big picture stayed with Saul till his very end of his life. The law of the niche. All players have a place where they add the most value. So Esther and the people were praying and fasting before she went before the king. Jesus and the demoniacs went, the 2 demoniacs that were healed went and told the people what he had done for them. As be a kind of a negative one. Absalom at the gate. He went to the gate of the city where important people go, but he was also able to meet with the people and win the hearts and influence of the people, but it was for a wrong reason, because he was actually planning to get to take the kingdom away from David. The law of Mount Everest. As challenges escalate, the need for teamwork elevates. Is there anyone that sticks out in the Bible that has had great challenges? There was one building the wall. What's his name? Does anybody know? Nehemiah. And how about another person that they started out with not really a big army compared with the other army, but they had to keep dwindling down to, what was his name? Anybody remember? So there was Gideon. So I wrote Esther again because she had other people praying and fasting for her. And how about another one that I'm not going to say this was this incident, but Daniel in the lion's den. But Daniel had how many friends? Three friends. This was when they first went before the king with the food in chapter 1. The law of the chain. The strength of a team is impacted by its weakest link. Was there a battle in Israel that was lost because there was somebody who did something they shouldn't have? Achan and the Battle of Ai. And this one's someone that you might not catch. Israel, one tribe in Israel did not go to battle, and you get this from Psalm 78 and 9. They turned back, though armed with bows, back on the day of battle. So Ephraim, that was the tribe that they were out to go in the battle, and they turned back. Even though they were armed and ready to go, but they turned back. Christ also had one, and his name was Judas. So there's a biblical example there. The law of the catalyst. Winning teams have players who make things happen. So Jonathan and his armor bearer, when they were facing the Philistines, and he went and climbed up the cliff line. And I wrote down David's mighty men. There's two places in the Bible, in Chronicles and I think it's 2 Samuel or 1 Samuel. Or anyway, it was one of those that lists his mighty men. There's like 38, I think, in all. And it tells some of what they did. This is an interesting one here. The law of the bad apple can be similar to the having the weakest link in the chain. I wrote Achan to the camp of Israel, and then there was a time where Aaron and Miriam were not doing so well when they were referring to their brother Moses, and Miriam actually got leprosy and had to be banished from the camp for 7 days. And I wrote down the parable of the 10 talents. The person who had 1 talent buried his talent, and therefore the other 2 did well, but this one decided to just bury his talent in the ground and bring it back. Ananias and Sapphira, they were collecting money. They did bring money, but they didn't bring what they pledged. The law of the compass. Vision gives members direction and confidence. So I'm writing down both negative and positive here for King Saul, or David and King Saul, when David went out to kill Goliath. King Saul gave him some positive, but it really wasn't positive because he gave him his armor to wear, and David had not proved that armor. Just a little side note, when they say David was a boy, he wasn't a boy, because a boy can't wear a king who is head and shoulders above everybody else and wear his armor. So he has to be close, or, so that's not part of the talk. But the law of the compass. Oh, I got that one. The Tower of Babel. They all were of one speech. So you can be together in teamwork, but you can be in a negative fashion, like they were at the Tower of Babel. The law of accountability. Teammates must be able to count on one another when it counts. So I have Daniel and his 3 friends. David and Jonathan, and then Jonathan and his armor bearer when they climbed the cliff to attack the Philistines. Paul and Silas in prison when they were singing. They were working together as a team. In negative ways, King Zedekiah talks to Jeremiah in prison for advice, and he's the one that put him in prison, but yet he still wanted his advice secretly. So not all the time does the teamwork work in a positive fashion. The law of the bench. Great teams have great depth. David had his mighty men. Paul had Silas, Elijah, and Elijah. And I wrote down here, it's not a biblical one, but we have youth in the church. There's a whole front row here and throughout the church, so we have youth in the church. Samuel, he was dedicated to the Lord at a young age. Jesus was 12 years old when he had his, when he was talking with the Jewish leaders at the Passover. But here's a negative one. Joshua in the Bible. Why is there Joshua a negative on this? Any ideas? Joshua is negative because no great leader after Joshua. So Moses, Joshua, Paul, you have Silas, Elijah, Elisha, but what great leader was after Joshua? Nobody. You had judges, but they fell into, so we got to be careful there. Hezekiah. After Hezekiah was Manasseh. He was the worst king in Israel. So just because there's a good doesn't mean that it follows through all the time. The law of the price tag. The team fails to reach its potential when it fails to pay the price. For which of you intending to build a tower sitteth down not first and counteth the cost? Wherever he hath sufficient funds to finish it, lest happily he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, and behold it begin to mock him. That's Luke 14:28 and 29. I've been to quite a few countries in Central America, and there's lots of cement buildings with rusted rebar sticking out that is unfinished. And somebody started the build, but did not have the ability to finish the job. The law of the scoreboard. The team can make adjustments when it knows where it stands. Joshua 24:15, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Acts 15:37 and 39. This is where Barnabas and Paul split over when Mark comes on board with them. Apparently he kind of abandoned them at some point, but we later see that as we're studying our lesson that I think it's the same Mark, that he comes back in, so he was given a second chance. The law of identity. Shared values define a team. Can two walk together? Elijah, Elisha, Jonathan and his armor bearer. The negative one, the two thieves on the cross. They were walking together. They were both thieves, but only one of them actually accepted Jesus. The law of communication. Interaction fuels action. I wrote down the road to Emmaus, those two that were walking, and they actually met Jesus in the way, but their eyes were held and they did not see who he was. They did not comprehend who he was until after they had broken the bread. Joseph and his brothers, when he first saw them, he's trying to communicate with them and see if they've actually changed, but he cannot give his identity at that point. But a negative one, Paul before King Agrippa in Acts 24:28, King Agrippa says, "Thou almost persuadeth me to be a Christian." Almost. So he was there, but said, "Not today." So got to be careful that in the communication process that we do not allow ourselves to not make the decision today when it counts. The law of number 15, the law of the edge. The difference between equally talented teams is leadership. So I wrote down Joab and Abner. Joab and Abner. Abner is defeated and flees, and then Joab's brother Asahel pursues after Abner. He's the one that's a very fast runner. But Abner tells him to take the armor from one of the soldiers. So basically, Abner was telling him, you can't fight me. You're fast, but you can't fight me because I have armor on and you don't. So he told him to make this fair, you better grab somebody's armor and take it. And Abner actually kills Joab's brother. And that's later why there was a problem there. But they were basically equal, but without armor on, it was not an equal fight. The law of high morale. When your winning hurts nothing. I wrote down when David cut off the part of King Saul's clothing. He could have killed the king, but he just took the cloth out to show him later from a distance that, hey, I was there. Look at your clothes. There's a part missing down there. David takes the spear and water container from King Saul at a later time. The law, number 17, the law of dividends. Investing in the team compounds over time. Daniel and his 3 friends, they have influence with the king. The parable of the talents, the first 2, not the last person, where they double their talents. Jesus and his disciples, they went out and made more disciples. And Paul with Mark, he first didn't want him, but then later recommended him. So I have, the last part here, some negative examples of teamwork. Men of Jerusalem stoning Stephen when Saul later changed his name to Paul. They laid down their garments at his feet to stone Stephen. So they were working in a team to do what they shouldn't have been doing at that time. Non-biblical example, and most of the younger here will not know what this is, but quite a few, maybe 20 some years ago, it's called Baby Jessica. She's a 2-year-old that fell down a well in Texas. The well was about this big around, 8 inches, and 1 leg up. She fell down maybe 20 some feet into the well. And there was a team of people working to rescue her. The earth was very difficult to cut through, like rock hard. But a whole team had committed, 24 plus hours to get her out. She got out safely. But the person who finally pulled her out, the paramedic who pulled her out, of course he was a hero, but he expected to be a hero forever. And that person actually committed suicide because he forgot that everybody is a hero that worked in the whole process. Communities here on Guam come together after a typhoon to clean up their neighbor's house and property. So that's a positive example. And I'll explain this other person here. Charlie Plum is a pilot from the Navy, and he ended up being a POW in Vietnam, in Hanoi. In prison, keeping in touch with your neighbor in the cell next to you, communicating in tap code at the price of getting punished. So in order to transfer the message from cell to cell, because they cannot talk, they're tapping. So if one person cannot communicate to the next cell, that means that everything down the lines, they have to work in a teamwork to get through, regardless of how long it takes. Even though he's never seen that person or talked to him. We also have a positive one, Paul and Silas singing in prison and praising after being beaten. If there is not teamwork, if there is not teamwork taking place, probably conflict is on the horizon or already at the door. Most of the thoughts that I got from this came from a pastor by the name of Tim Delena. In his sermon, I got some of these notes from Getting to the Root of the Conflict. A story was told of a man that was stranded on an island for some time by himself. When he was finally rescued, they found out he had built 3 huts on the island. So they came to him and said, "What in the world do you need 3 huts for only one person?" He said, "One is my home, one is my church, and the other is the church I used to go to." The man can't get along with himself, yet alone others. So he has a problem. He's a one-man team, but he's not doing too well. K.S. Chesterton answered in a letter in the London Times question in the religious section, "What's wrong with the world?" And he said, "I am. I am." Where does he say the problem lies? Right here. So you kind of point to yourself. That's when you point at others, you got 3 fingers pointing back at you. Does the Bible give us any clues what might be a problem with us? So this one I got from the New Living Translation, Drawing Close to God. That would be James, I forgot to write that in there. I think it's James 4. 4, 1 through 5. What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires that war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Yet you do not have what you want because you do not ask God for it. Even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want only that which will give you pleasure. You adulterers, don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? I say it again, if you want to be a friend of the world, you make yourself an enemy of God. Do you think the scriptures have no meaning? So I think I wrote down in here previous notes that I had. There was like 15 or 18 different times it says you in here. So there's a lot of you, which would be, me, when you're reading it yourself. So there's a text that's talking about a lot of problems with us. This is where the problem lies. Warning against pride. So the King James part here says, same verse, "From whence come wars and fightings among you?" So it says wars instead of using, in the other version, quarrels and fights. So the King James uses you, ye, and your, which is yourself, about 15 times. And the other version, I think, was 18 times in there. Twice the word church is used in the Bible in Matthew 16, 13 through 18. Whom do men say I am? Some say you are John the Baptist, some say Elias, others Jeremiah, and one of the prophets. And he said, "Whom do you say?" And they said, "Thou art the Christ." So there's a conflict between what the world says and what we say in the church. So we see this in the news, what they're trying to promote that might not be biblical. So what is biblical and what's being said in the world is not exactly the same. So there's conflict there. Matthew 18, 15 through 17. This is a text talking about when you have a problem in the church, inside the church, not with those outside, that you need to go to them, talk to them, and if not, bring 2 or 3 others with, and bring it before the church before doing things out in the worldly courts and stuff. If you are in a fight with someone, there's also a fight inside of you. And James 4:1, they call it a war. So we have to be careful that if you're having problems with someone else, there's possibly a problem that's also within you. pride promotes strife. So the last part of James 4:5, the Spirit who dwells in us yearns jealousy. Conflict, jealousy, and strife, this is my idea, they're closely related, I think. Not everybody or your friends are happy with your success or leadership or your talents of work. Some biblical examples are Daniel, Joseph, Nehemiah, David, and Joab actually kills 2 leaders in Israel, not in battle, because they were possibly going to Abner, because it looked like Joab was going to be sidelined or at least pushed down a little bit. And then there was another relative of, I think it was David, that he actually killed one of the kind of generals. So war is so intense, people are willing to kill something to get what they want. So why call it a war? You could say to yourself, I haven't killed anybody, but listen to this. Wars kill people or something. No, I haven't done that. But how about, have you killed a marriage? Have you killed a relationship? Have you killed a friendship? Have you killed a church ministry? And I'll just say this one side note. My brother in the States is the church. They have a church school. They have gone through 25 teachers in 9 years. Okay? Something's wrong. Either you can't get good teachers, or there's a problem in the board or somebody in church. So your church can't grow with conflicts in it. That's a lot of teachers, so they don't stay very long, and there's sometimes people need to be removed from a position that they're in because they're causing others to not stay. Wars do not always kill people, but they leave a lot of damage. Shattered lives, hurt not dealt with turns into bitterness. When it takes root, it defiles other people. War on the inside is war on the outside. The weaker the argument, the stronger the words. If you do not see things yourself, then other people are forced to close to you to point it out. Though through changing challenge, when you are through changing, you're through. So we can't be saying, oh, I'm never going to change. You can't be like that. Here's a quote from Ty Gibson. He's a pastor in SDA church somewhere with a ministry. Probably we have the most dangerous tendencies we possess as human beings is to draw conclusions with insufficient information. The reason that it is so dangerous is because once we settle on a position and voice it to others, pride of opinion becomes a major obstacle to change, even when additional light demands it. Then the strength of conviction that would have been fastened to the truth through adequate study is stubbornly devoted to error in order to save face. Revelation 3:20 through 21. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice, open the door. I will come into him and sup with him, and he with me. To him that overcometh, I will sit with me in my throne, even as I overcame and am set down with the Father in his throne. If we don't have teamwork, we have conflict. If we don't overcome, we cannot sit with Christ in his throne. The next part comes from a book. You can actually buy this one here in Guam. Confrontation. It's a book on confrontation. The difference between destructive and constructive confrontation. The first one is a negative form of this. So destructive confrontation focuses on character uses degrading, accusing, threatening words to motivate change, assumes a negative motive in offensive behavior, demands immediate correction as a condition for continued fellowship. You ever heard of somebody wanting, I'm gonna defriend you? That would be one right there. A modern version of it is, I'm going to defriend you, so you defriend your friend. Imposes no consequences or disproportionate consequences. Puts total responsibility for correction on the offender. So this is not the way to do it. The way to do it would be focus on behavior, use living and hopeful, encouraging words to motivate change, assumes a desire to grow and become more Christ-like, invites confession and eager to forgive and seeks reconciliation, allows time to grow and to learn better behaviors, offers appropriate consequences that develop character and responsibility, accept responsibility for accountability through the change process. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps not record of wrongs, loves does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always preserves. Love never fails. The last part there, when I read love is patient, that's from 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8. That's kind of a summary there. So how can we combine getting to the root of conflict and teamwork together? Here's a short story by that pilot that I mentioned his name, Charlie Plum, who was a former POW and spent 103 days, it's almost 5.7 years as a POW in there. And he says, you can learn a lot of things in an 8x8 cell. And I'm paraphrasing some from various stuff I got off the internet. You can learn leadership, patience, faith, communications, working with others you cannot see, and getting rid of self-pity. He happened to have a person that he believes was God sent. His name was Bob Shoemaker. He was another pilot, and he was in the room. There was a room in between these two. Now, I don't know how the guy got a hold of it, but somehow he got a wire that he could put in between, and they communicated what is called tap code. So you take the alphabet, skip the letter K, and go A, B, C, and go 5 across and keep going, and then you tap. So the letter A would be 1. Let's see, the letter, if it's 5, you would tap 5 times, and if it was somewhere down, you tap 5, and then like Z, you would tap 5 times and 5 times. So it's a very lengthy process. But here's what he told him. You will find you have just joined the finest team you will ever play on. You will see the best example of leadership in the world right here in this prison camp. Our leaders cannot talk to us. They cannot fire us. They cannot give us a bonus. They have redefined our mission here. They have given us an anchor. We are still combatants here. We are not on the defense. We are warriors. We will fight this war to our last dying breath. Now this is interesting where he says the best team. They're not a team. They're in individual cells. But how good was this? How good did this actually take place? Their leadership and their teamwork. Here in solitary confinement, they were able to communicate and establish leadership, teamwork, even though they could not talk face to face. In person, they're communicating. They are communicating with how good was the leadership and teamwork. out of 591 POWs, how many do you think of these what percentage do you think had post-traumatic stress for being a POW for years? All of them. All of them. You are absolutely wrong. Out of 500 and, well, there was more, I think there was more than 591. I'm just going on the numbers he said. 591 had post-traumatic growth. That's 96%, because I did the math. Only 4% had post-traumatic, syndrome, traumatic syndrome. So these people were better off after they got out than what they were when they came in. So this is how good the leadership was there and the communication. So 96% were, and so I wrote down some of what he said. They produced 17 generals, 7 admirals, vice presidential candidates, 2 senators. I'll read this second one first. Jeremiah Denton, and the most famous one is John McCain. If you ever look at photos of John McCain and he raises his hands, he can only raise his hands about this high. That's because of being tortured and injuries when he was got ejected. So they produced doctors, lawyers, preachers, teachers, and other professionals. They had every reason to complain and be bitter and blame their future on their bad luck and status as a POW. But look at their success rate. And I just quickly, these numbers may not be exactly correct, but one site said about the average Vietnam veteran is about 15% post-traumatic syndrome, and Gulf War 26%. But I think those numbers might be a little bit higher in there. Paul in the Bible just joined the finest team to play on when he was converted on the Damascus Road. Compare with Bob Shoemaker and talk to Charlie Plum in the prison cell. Paul was in prison more than once. When Paul and Silas were in prison, they were rejoicing, singing, even though they were beaten. They finally gave a Bible study and a baptism, and actually had a baptism there that day, and one day in prison. Paul was not a prisoner in a real sense, nor did he have prison thinking. But he could evangelize through singing, because remember, the other prisoners did not escape when because there was something in their singing, and something, the presence of God was there, that the other prisoners didn't run when they ended up being free in that earthquake. And then finally the head jailer was baptized. Paul probably had the best example of leadership and teamwork in the Bible, next to what Christ would have done. He was not on the defense, he was on the offense even in prison. He was still a Christian warrior even in Rome. He was a Christian warrior to the end. 2 Timothy 4:7. Paul said, I have fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. Really interesting story, again from Charlie Plum. Who packs your parachute? Charlie Plum was eating at a restaurant in Kansas City with his wife when someone came to him and said, you're that guy, fighter pilot, part of that Top Gun outfit, who shot down over North Vietnam, spent almost 6 years as a POW. And Charlie looks up at him and says, how do you know all that? And he said, because I packed your parachute. Here's a guy who works down in the ship at a very long table, folding parachutes all day long. No one thanks him, but he does his job with perfection and is thankful just to serve. He has several of the qualities of the laws of teamwork. He is faithful in his duties even when no one thanks him or gives thought of. He's just thankful to serve. The parachute packer, and you could, if you had the list, I just wrote down some. You had law one. One is too small to achieve success. He's part of a bigger team, even though his role may be small. Number two, law of the big picture. Goal is more important than the role. Law three, law of the niche. All players have a place where they add value, because if his parachute didn't open, that pilot would have been dead. Number 10 of those laws, the law of the bench. Great teams have great depth, even down in the ship while the planes fly above. Every day we will be challenged with our skills in teamwork and working to get to the root of the conflict. So if you don't pray and study the Bible today, then no one has packed your parachute. The Word of God is our parachute for leadership and teamwork and getting to the root of the conflict. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Psalms 119:105. So with that, we'll have closing prayer. And so shall we all bow our heads. Our kind Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this talk here, because I need it also myself, and dealing with various problems and things. We ask, Lord, that you also, that can benefit anybody here in their school or workplace or even in a home environment. We also ask your blessing upon the food and give us strength, and also take us back safely to our places of residence. We pray in your name. Amen.